What is Ashes of Creation? It's kind of like, does this shirt make me look like mean? I don't know. There's something, this look is different for me, and I feel like it makes me look mean. I don't know. Anyway, I've loosely followed Ashes of Creation for a couple years, but it's been one of those games that's kind of been in the periphery. It's been around me, but it's not one that I've really dug my teeth into. I've been kind of putting my focus on a couple other Kickstarter games because I felt like, well, Ashes of Creation looked cool, it was a little bit further out. I followed Crowfall, I followed Legends of Aria, and of course, Pantheon Rise of the Fallen. But I think it's time we give Ashes of Creation their due. Now, I've even briefly covered a little bit of Ashes of Creation on this channel in the, or rather, at least the Unreal Engine 5 switch and the MMO predictions video. But it's time to actually jump into Ashes and with a little bit of an introduction, because I never really sat down to ask the question, what is Ashes of Creation? This game is currently in alpha, so my warning here is the same warning I have for anyone who's following Pantheon or any other game that is this early in the process. There could be massive changes to the game once it's actually released from now. In these exploratory videos, I always think it's important to hear from the game's creator first. Let's hop over to the Ashes of Creation website and see what they have to say about their own game. Experience an MMORPG where everything is permanently impacted by your actions. Explore, trade, build, and let the world take form. From your imagination, through your will, and into everyone's reality. What you create will be the cornerstone of the next explorer's ambition. The key features of Ashes of Creation are risk versus reward and its open world. For risk versus reward, the team talks about opportunities to experience massive warfare, join epic trade caravans, gather valuable components, and craft exquisite items. To beset you on your way, you'll be challenged by other players. PvP, y'all! That's a thing that is not really mentioned in other games that we're following. PvP is going to be an essential part of this game. We'll get more on that later. It sounds exciting. To beset you on your way, you'll be challenged by other players, the creatures of the land, and even the environment itself. Now, all of this comes across as pretty vague, or at the very least, expected. In an MMO, we expect risk versus reward. We expect challenging NPCs. Sieging castles isn't new, nor are trade caravans and crafting. But in the second feature, I think we start to see something unique to Ashes. Ashes of Creation is a unique take on the MMORPG experience. Our world structure is dynamic and built to react to your actions. Cities will rise and fall as you shape the world of Vera. Quests and secrets will unlock as populations gather and their needs grow. As the world's NPC structure is established in real time, you will have the ability to destroy what's been created, paving the way for new developments, populations, and change. Political strife and intrigue will play a very real role in the structure of your experience. Gone are the days of static worlds. Change is here to stay. This is, I think, what's going to set Ashes apart. There's a few things at play here, and I have to talk about the memories it evokes. One is a good one, Shadowbane. I'm reminded of how player politics and decisions had a direct and changeable impact on the world. Shadowbane tried to mix a static world with a changing world, and in my opinion, they were pretty successful, but may have been a bit too hardcore in the PvP to really court a sustained audience. I mentioned the good. Well, let's also mention the bad. EverQuest Next. Travel back with me to 2013 when Dave Georgeson on stage at SOE Live said, "Enough is enough. Enough of the same game already. It's time to get some new ideas into the genre, and if someone has to do it, it should be EverQuest. What this was referring to was something that was bandied about as emergent gameplay. That is, players being able to create unique experiences in the game that could not be recreated. This was talking about consequences in-game, consequences in an MMO. This was included in one of the core features of the game that would never release, called rallying calls, which were supposed to be a 2 to 3 month quest built on the public quest system from Destiny of Valius in EverQuest 2, where players would create new parts of the world or see it destroyed. The example which I remember keenly learning about back then was about settlers leaving Hallis to build. Every actions players took opened up new possibilities and new storyline options for that camp. If you followed Ashes, this probably sounds a bit familiar. Ashes of Creation is built on a node system. Nodes have been shown off at various stages in different Ashes of Creation videos. This seems to be the most interesting and unique feature of Ashes of Creation, though hardly the only one that had piqued my interest in the game. In fact, nodes probably deserve their own thoroughly researched video, but for the purpose of this introduction, we'll stay on the surface. Nodes are points of interest across the map that can be upgraded through player progress, adventuring, harvesting, crafting, etc. We'll get to how they build up in a second, but an important thing to note here is this. Nodes are the world. Granted, this is a bit dated at this point, but the introduction to nodes on the Ashes of Creation website blog in 2019 said this: "Nodes are the heart of the world. They create the ebb and flow of life. At their core, nodes are preset points in the world, wrapped in a zone of influence and surrounded by geographic areas that change over time, based upon player participation. As a node advances, it influences the type of content within itself and the surrounding areas." As previously covered, nodes will level up with players' action, and there's currently 7 levels or stages. Level 0, Wilderness, Level 1, Expedition, Level 2, Camp, Level 3, Village, Level 4, Town, Level 5, City, and the one that I'm most interested in, Level 6, Metropolis. There are 4 types of nodes: economic, military, scientific, and divine. These node types are static, so no going all Revenge of the Nerds on the military or economic nodes to change them into scientific nodes. That doesn't mean they can't be influenced though, as the influential race determines the architecture and quest lines of the node. What's to stop players from leveling up every node to max, you say? Well, once a node reaches stage 3, it takes over nearby nodes and makes them vassal nodes. These nodes will always be at least 1 level below the parent node, and these nodes are also politically aligned to the parent node. So now we know a little bit about nodes, a unique and interesting feature of Ashes of Creation. But what else is there to Ashes of Creation? Well, there's 64 classes. Okay, 60, maybe that's a little, that might be getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, because it's not 64 true classes. These break down into 8 archetypes, the true classes as it were. You have the Bard, Cleric, Fighter, Mage, Ranger, Rogue, Summoner, and Tank. These archetypes combine with a primary and secondary archetype to make different classes. For example, a primary Bard with a Fighter secondary is a Tellsword. Well, how does this work out with class balance? Well, secondary classes can alter your role within the Trinity, the Holy Trinity that is. Sounds familiar to anyone who's been playing MMOs for, the last 20 years? The example given by the team was that as a fighter primary with a mage secondary, all your active skills come from the fighter, but those active skills are augmented by the secondary class. So while there might be 64 different named classes, there aren't radical differences between some of them. So it looks like we'll have a Holy Trinity with some modifications. However, Holy Quaternity might be more appropriate reading some of the information on classes. Take the Bard, for example, which is described as a support class. Support is broken down into healer or non-healer. And I think by doing that, you give a extra role, even if it's just a partial role, beyond that Holy Trinity, which I think is kind of necessary for MMOs. I feel like EverQuest, EverQuest 2, and a couple other games did a very good job of branching out that Holy Trinity from the healer, tank, and DPS to add in a class that kind of fits into multiple ways. The Bard, the Enchanter, those kind of classes. But I want to end this section with a quote from Stephen Sharif that dates back to October of 2018. We have our 8 base archetypes, and the Trinity is a pretty strong influence with regards to the 8 base classes. However, the area in which we actually begin to play with that line between the Trinity is in the secondary classes that you can pick. That's where we begin to blend those spaces and allow people a little bit of influence over their role and whether or not they fit perfectly within a particular category within the Trinity. So didn't I say something about player versus environment? No. Player versus freaking player. PvP, which I haven't engaged in way too long. I really want a PvP right now. Do y'all want a duel? I'm down for a duel. So we can't talk about Ashes of Creation without talking about PvP. And no, I'm not talking about their Battle Royale. PvP is essential to Ashes of Creation. For example, destructions of nodes through PvP. PvP in Ashes open world will use what I'd call a soft flagging system, at least from what I've read. This isn't a system like World of Warcraft implemented, where open world PvP was strictly opt-in with incentives to do so, but it's not as archaic either as the PK system in a game like Ultima Online. PvP is encouraged, but in this soft flagging system, it's what I'd call consensual PvP. There are 3 levels: non-combatant, combatant, and corrupted. A player who engages in a forced attack, as in a not AoE attack, will become a combatant. If the attacked player attacks back, that player also becomes a combatant. Death penalties are reduced for combatants who die, thus encouraging this consensual PvP. But what happens if that person does not attack back? Well, if you're ganking lower players, a term I'm sure many are familiar with, the attacker becomes corrupt, which increases their death penalties and reveals their location to bounty hunters. There's a lot more to this PvP system, more than can be covered in a single video, but I'll end this section with this. Ashes does not appear to be going the high stakes loot PvP route of a game such as Ultima Online or Mortal Online 2. There will be some loot drop. It'll only be gatherable and processed goods unless you're corrupt, and which incurs weapon and item drops. So if you're bad and you're mean and a bit of a bully, you'll lose your toys. Perhaps to a bounty hunter.
This is the way.
There is so much more to this game, but I didn't want to overload you. This is an introduction video, and it's a video where I started to do my own research for the first time deeply on this game. And in everything I was researching, I became more and more interested in what Ashes of Creation has to offer. This game has had kind of what I would call like a friendly rivalry for a while with Pantheon, as the two of them seem to be going back and forth with being the most anticipated game, especially on MMORPG.com. I think it's safe to say that both of these games are trying to appeal to an audience that is passionate about MMOs. I see a lot of similarities between the two teams' approaches and trying to make an MMO that will appeal to an MMO audience and not necessarily one that will be a huge financial success. That's not to say they won't both be huge financial successes. We could be looking back in a couple years at Ashes of Creation and Pantheon being top MMOs in the space. But it feels like the goal behind these games is the game itself, and to me that's a very refreshing thing to see. Ashes of Creation is certainly an ambitious project, perhaps in a way a little bit more ambitious than, say, Pantheon. And the head of the project, Stephen Sharif, appears to have a genuine love for the genre and a passion for making the game the best that he can, as well as substantial wealth to help it succeed, along with a very successful Kickstarter that net over $3 million back in 2017. Granted, that's, a drop in the bucket compared to, say, a certain MMO that has to do with stars and citizens that needs to launch, please. But it's still not an insignificant amount of money to put towards an MMO. Now, a huge shout out to the community wiki for Ashes of Creation. They made the research for this so much easier than it would have been otherwise. I've linked them down below. Go take a look. There's a ton of information, and of course, since it's a wiki, it's all sourced, so you can go directly to the source where it came from. Granted, some of those sources are no longer available, but there are a lot that are. So what do you think? Is Ashes of Creation a game that you will be keeping your eye on? It's one, like Pantheon, that I really want to see succeed. I think they have a unique approach on the genre and one that can appeal to a lot of people. I will definitely be giving it a shot, and I'm even considering backing it. I haven't yet, but who knows? The more MMOs that are made by people that are passionate about the genre, the better as far as I'm concerned. My name is Redbeard Flynn. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider leaving a like right down there somewhere or other. You know what to do. You've been on YouTube for more than 5 minutes. Yeah, you get it. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I look forward to seeing you again next week.